And good morning for a morning coffee with Dave Baker,
Hello.
the guy who sits beside me all the time, and even my roomie's sitting beside me.
Wait, we're on the wrong sides of one another.
Yeah, it's flipped around.
Yeah, okay.
This is my second try at this. Apparently my phone is going on the brink, so sorry about that for this morning. So Dave Baker.
Yes, sir.
Do you know who this guy is? He is the history and swordsmith that we have on the show.
I'm just
all
a
the time.
goofball who makes stuff.
The goofball who makes stuff.
Look, here's the thing, and this is something that comes up a lot. Jay and Jason are master smiths, and when we say master smith, that they've gone through a program. They've started out, as a journeyman smith, and gone through a learning process and gone through a testing process. I'm kind of just a self-taught guy. I started out in the entertainment industry teaching how to use swords in the entertainment industry, and I couldn't afford to buy them back in the day, so I just started making them. And as I started making them, I started studying them. So mine's just a pure passion for these weapons, these bladed weapons, and I'm willing to literally travel around the globe to see more of them, to get my hands on them. So I think that's one of the fun things about what we're doing with the show, is that we've got different aspects in the judges. We've got the master smiths who come from a certain place, me who comes from a passion for the history of how these weapons were made and why they were made, and you who's an end user, and I had the opportunity last year. Doug spent some time breaking my knuckles in the morning, which was an excellent experience. It was a lot of fun. I hope we do it again as we'll go up on the roof when we get some better weather.
Yeah.
It's been a little bit cold and gloomy here.
It's a fun thing to from our perspective. Basically, what we're doing is you have the masters, then you have somebody who studies the sword, especially the swords, because of the history of that. So it's always nice, because I learned a lot. I just listen to these guys talk, and once in a while I say, "What do you think, Doug?" Yes. That's about it. That's my job there. Until it's time to get to test the weapons. And what I've loved about this is sometimes when they bring out selections, remember, when we do the reveal, those beautiful works of art are swords that Dave
those
makes.
are my toys. I make the weapons that are displayed for that final round. And another thing that some people might not know about the show, first round tests are based on tests that are done with either Jay or Jason's knives. If they're doing the test, we have already done that test with one of their knives, and their knives have passed that test. If their knife doesn't pass that test, we reevaluate the test and rebuild the test. So we're never asking a smith to build a knife that one of our other smiths haven't done. And I can attest that Jay and Jason have both made 3-hour knives, or made knives under 6 hours that we then test with.
Yeah.
And then the same goes for that third round, where I've made the weapon that will be the example, and we test our tests with that weapon. So again, if my weapon doesn't pass the test, then we reevaluate the test.
Yeah.
And,
we never pretty much try to put anybody or anybody's work and set them up for failure. Everything that you see over there, we've at least tried it our way to make sure that it is attainable.
Yes.
And we're always striving to make a lot of interesting things happen within the show, because it keeps exciting. Me, I just sit back and I enjoy everything. So I've learned a lot from it. Remember, I'm more of a knife edge weapon guy, knives, not so much the swords. And Dave is the one who educates me on the use of the sword.
His body of physical knowledge is
what everybody shares with me, at least is the common sense of looking at an end user.
Yeah.
Will it, what are weapons for? There's one primary use of the weapon, right? It's supposed to, pretty much cut, and in our kill test, it should kill. So we try to bring common sense into whatever weapons we do, because remember, some of these weapons don't even have, are not even made anymore.
Well, that's one of the interesting things is sometimes we get a weapon, or we choose a weapon that doesn't have what you would call a continuous school of use. So at some point, that weapon has stopped being used and become either a symbol of a people or a social group or an ethnic group, and it's no longer used as a weapon, so it's no longer practiced to be used as a weapon. So a lot of times assumptions are made about weapons by looking at them. You look at the thing, you say, oh, it's got a big point on it. But until you put it in your hands and you start actually cutting a target, you're not going to know how that weapon how that weapon reacts, how that weapon's used.
And a lot of times you have to look at the culture of which it comes from.
Exactly.
Were there a culture that wore armor? Were there a culture that fought with a shield? And all these different things that affect the creation and the common sense of its use. Now, in the show, obviously, we are not doing combat. No. We're just testing the weapon. And what a lot of people don't understand is, how come I don't cut a certain way or do that? When I'm not an expert at some of these weapons, because some of these weapons weren't even created or have no manuals of its use. So what we do bring in is the common sense of it all. If it's got an edge, will it cut? If it's got a point, will it thrust? And what would be, from doing the research, I'll go, Dave, how do you think this was used?
Well,
and it makes sense by looking at it. It was
sure.
like, well, if you pick it up today, this is how we're going to test
Not
it.
only that, but if you look culturally at where a weapon comes from and who that culture was fighting, you'll also start to see how that weapon was designed for that fight, as in, say it's an armor culture. All right, so you're going to start seeing picks and axes and maces. If it's a non-armored culture, you can make a ruler. You can literally take a ruler and put an edge on it and cut somebody open with it, because it doesn't have to be hard. Bodies are these things. They've got hard things in the middle. They got bones in them, but skin cuts. I mean, just how many times have you been in the kitchen? You're cutting meat in the kitchen with a dull knife. It still cuts. So hardened weapons, flexible weapons, weapons that are designed to go against a certain opponent or enemy. That's something you have to take into account when you're designing a test for a weapon.
And a certain kind of material, or, when we put these tests, sometimes a particular weapon will cut this but won't cut that. Surprised me, some of the things, but we test it as evenly and as fair as we can, because we need to find one way to make a judgment, because it's a competition. Otherwise, in some videos, you could cut, let me try a different way. Right. I get one shot. As a matter of fact, I get one shot to feel it the first time. So it's hard to dial yourself in. At least when you're going shooting, you get to dial your guns out. We don't have that because we're judges.
Well, and beyond that, the idea has been floated, show more historical technique. Well, honestly, someone hands me a broadsword and says, try to cut through those bones. Well, you're not going to get a lot of historical technique in it. We hand dug, here's a knife, cut that fish.
Yeah.
I mean,
how hard?
So you're not going to get, it's not the show that's going to show you the historical technique of how that weapon is going to be used. This is about the making of those weapons, the technique. And here's something that's come up again and again and again. It's been my word for the month: scale. How important scale is when you're building these historical replicas, even when you're building the knives in the shop. That handle to blade ratio, that we've been seeing some interesting things happen where all right, here's the way, I'm a friend of the right words to describe it. Okay, there's bladesmithing, which is the knowledge of making a blade. Add to that weaponsmithing, the knowledge of making a weapon. How that weapon feels in your hand with the blade, and how you can move it, make it react, and work as a weapon. A knife's a tool. A sword's a weapon. A knife. You can use a knife as a weapon. You can use a stick as a weapon. You can use that pen on the table as a weapon. But a sword is designed specifically to be a weapon. And if you're designing a knife specifically to be a weapon, you have to take that into account.
Yep. And when he talks about scale, sometimes we're talking about how the overall look, but the feel. The feel is so important. who knew handles were so important? It's like I always look at it as, in order to fire your bullet, you got to have a trigger. The handle is that transition point for that. If you can't wield it, you can't grab it. But then some of these are beautiful, but still we have to find some way to judge someone. So we're just going to go to different ideas.
Yeah, oftentimes we wind up with handles that we use the term indexing. When you pick something up, can I borrow your? All right, when you pick something up, you should know immediately where the edge is. If you can't tell where that edge is, I mean, this one.
If it starts rolling in your hand.
Even on this, look, this is a little aluminum training knife, and you might, I'll get that on there. You might think, well, that's just a thin rectangular handle, but notice the curve. When I pick it up, it falls into my hand. I put it this way, and I'm like, oop, it's curved the wrong way. Doesn't work. Boom. It's instantly where I can use it as soon as I pick it up. That's indexing. Whether it's curvature of the handle, whether it's the way that handle is shaped, incredibly important. And then the transition, how that blade transitions from the handle to the knife. We see it oftentimes where this will just neck down, and now suddenly your hand is pushed into a position, or what's Jason always going on
particular
about?
positions,
Finger wells.
Finger welds and everything. It's got to be comfortable. You know, to me now, if I have to pick up something where my hand to grab it or hold on to it starts doing this because it's too wide, that's an issue. For me, what is comfortable is to be able to do this. If you can do this without having to adjust everything else, that's a good handle for me. And we talk about now. Sometimes we are nitpicking on a handle, but that's because it's a competition. So, and that's what we like.
Well,
I love going down to the very tiny details because that means that they presented us with beautiful work.
Yeah, when we get several weapons or two weapons at the end, where we have to get down to literally the feel of the handle to make a decision on who's winning and losing. Those are really good smiths.
Yep.
Those smiths have knocked it out of the park, and it happens again and again and again. Which is fantastic. I mean, one of the proudest things that I am about this show is the guys and girls, I've been able to meet, the smiths who come into the forge and bring that level of talent. And here we are. The worst part of our job is sending one of those people home.
Yeah.
Because you see, all this heart, all this work go into something. Okay, it didn't work out. Well, it's 3 hours. I mean, that's not a long time to make anything.
It's not the norm.
No, it's not the norm.
So we're taking questions from everybody over here about it. If you got a question about Dave Baker, go ahead and send some questions. So here's a common question.
I'll probably deny everything. I didn't do it.
What happens to the blades that don't make the cut? The blades that don't make the cut are kept by the network. The network owns them.
Yeah.
And the winner, of course, gets paid, and the runner-up, we're trying to get it to where they will get to get their blades back. Yeah. But as of now, the network owns them. A lot of the blades you will find displayed around the walls,
right.
And that's what happens to them. We don't remake them or throw them away. They're kept in there for a reason, but most of them are displayed and put around the wall. And what else do we have here? Well, good morning to a lot of people. A lot of people from Ireland and UK and...
That's because they're up.
Exactly.
All my friends in California are sound asleep.
It's obviously our day off today, so it's so gloomy out here.
Yeah,
it's rainy and gloomy in New York City. But aside from that, one of the things I was looking forward to mentioning also is that some of the works that Dave makes are recreations of historical pieces for movies. So there's a lot of intricate beauty in what he does in some of the things that he makes, especially for movies. Like, what movies have you had your weapons used in?
I do a lot of stuff for TV. It's interesting. Here's a little factoid. For television and film, most of the weapons blades aren't steel. They're aluminum.
Yep.
By using aluminum, I'm able to make something that looks very deadly, but it has a nice thick edge. So when you're doing this,
safer.
Yeah, and there's rarely, except in a special effects type shot, a need to have a sharp blade on set. As a matter of fact, it's a terrible idea because there's a million people running around. The opportunity for somebody to get hurt goes up.
And that's why they can wield it so fast. Real heavy, put heavy weapons in there, nobody's going to be moving that well. And some of them are even made out of what? Rubber?
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
you know,
and-
stunt stuff.
Yeah.
People doing high falls with a blade. You don't put anything hard in their hands. But I've done, let's see, this past year I did stuff for The Last Ship. They used my stuff on Leverage. They used my stuff on The Librarians.
Mhm.
A lot of stuff with Librarians. In the past, I've done, God, I did so many weapons for Dragon Ball Evolution, and only one of them is actually on screen. I mean, there's oh God, what was that? Jonah Hex,
the
actually
Western,
the brand that burns his face. I did that.
So lots of movies, a lot of
TV
Rob
stuff. For, Deadliest Warrior, I did tons of stuff.
So some questions coming up over here. Let's see. Are we doing an all military armed forces Forge and Fire challenge? Well, just keep an eye out, keep watching for that. We're always
Yeah.
looking for ideas.
Yeah, if it hasn't already aired, we can't really discuss it. It's one of those things that they like having surprises in the future. I think that's a great idea. Yay for all the folks in our armed services.
And another question, is there ever going to be a judges episode? I mean, remember the different levels, right? You got the mastersmiths, you got a historical, weapons recreation specialist, and one who doesn't forge. I just draw and design this stuff, and then I give it to these guys to make it. Post-production.
That will probably not happen, and the simple reason is this show is not about us. We are simply there to evaluate the work that's being done by the Smiths. The show is about the Smiths. It's about their talent. It's about what they bring in. We just come up with the challenges. And yes, I know we have people make knives out of suits of armor and car parts. But think about it. I started out making my first sword and knife out of a leaf spring off of a truck. And that's where a lot of people start out. And cultures around the world, railroad spikes, pieces of railroad track. Around the world, people have used whatever piece of steel they can get their hands on to make weapons. And part of the game.
Right. Another question over here, is there a bladed weapon you would not have the contestants create in the show? For the most part, we try to stick with, it's History Channel, we try to stick with weapons from history. There have been requests to do some weapons created from fantasy shows and sci-fi. Nothing against those, but we try to stick with something that was used in history.
Yeah, the other thing about sci-fi and fantasy weapons is they're usually owned by the production company or designer who came up with them. So you can get into legal situations when you say, oh, do the Klingon bat'leth. Well, that's owned by the Star Trek people. It's that kind of a thing. But honestly, there are so many historical weapons to do that we could keep going. Remember, just because it has a curve and it's a saber doesn't mean all sabers are alike or they were all used alike. Each one has its own thing.
So for the most part, it is we try to keep it exciting, and just watch for the upcoming episodes that we're filming. So far, I'm having a great time filming the fourth season. There's a lot of stuff I've learned, a lot of exciting things, a lot of new things.
Really nice weapons.
And
some really good choices made this year. And with the extension of the 10 shows, I'm working on those weapons right now out here in New York, and some of those are really good choices.
Yeah. So anyways, thank you for coming by.
My pleasure.
We're
Right
gonna-
across the hall, so it's pretty easy.
Yeah, right. But keep putting your questions in, and every time we get a chance, we'll try to answer it accordingly. And thank you for waking me up this morning. I slept in. Oh boy.
I didn't. I was up. I was like, "Hey, Doug, we're gonna do this morning." He's like, "I'm sleeping."
Yeah, once in a while I do stay up late, and I stayed up very late this morning and finally watching. This is a problem when you start catching up on movies. Like, I got a day off.
There you go.
Watch movies. Oh, it's 5 in the morning. I mean, they need to go to bed.
And I'm going hiking around the fabulous New York City. Gonna hike across the Brooklyn Bridge this morning, just for fun.
Very good. I might go back to bed. All right, guys. Take care. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.